I, 28M, met Aubrey, 26F, 3 years ago at a local coffee shop called The Daily Grind. I'd started going there regularly after a tough breakup with my college girlfriend. The familiarity of the place and the smell of fresh coffee became a sort of therapy for me. Aubrey was a barista there, and from the first day I noticed her, I was drawn to her vibrant personality and infectious laugh. Over time, our interactions grew from quick exchanges over the counter to longer conversations during her breaks. I learned that she was an aspiring artist, always doodling on napkins or spare bits of paper. Her sketches were beautiful, full of life and emotion. I found myself visiting the coffee shop more frequently, timing my visits to coincide with her shifts. After a few months of this dance, I finally gathered the courage to ask her out. To my surprise and delight, she said yes. Our first date was at a small local fair. We rode the Ferris wheel, played carnival games, and talked for hours. It was during this conversation that I learned about Aubrey's past. She told me she was an orphan. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was just 12. The memory was still painful for her, and I could see the hurt in her eyes as she spoke about it. She'd been living with her aunt, Margaret, ever since. However, their relationship was strained. Margaret was a stern, traditional woman who didn't understand Aubrey's artistic aspirations. She constantly pushed Aubrey to pursue a real career, dismissing her passion for art as a childish hobby. As we continued dating, I noticed that Aubrey often seemed sad and withdrawn. She confided in me about her struggles with depression, which had started after her parents' death and was exacerbated by her aunt's constant criticism. I tried my best to be there for her, offering emotional support and encouraging her to seek professional help. However, Aubrey was resistant to the idea of therapy, saying she didn't want to be seen as broken. About 6 months into our relationship, Aubrey had a huge fight with her aunt. Margaret had found out that Aubrey had dropped out of the business course she'd been taking at the local community college. In a fit of rage, Margaret had destroyed several of Aubrey's paintings, calling them worthless scribbles. Aubrey called me in tears, asking if she could stay at my place for a few days. Those few days turned into weeks, and eventually, we decided to move in together. It was a big step, but I was happy to provide Aubrey with a stable and loving environment. I had a decent job as a software developer, and I figured we could manage financially even if Aubrey needed some time to find her footing. Living together wasn't always easy. Aubrey's depression sometimes made it difficult for her to hold down a job. She tried working at a few different places, a bookstore, a clothing boutique, even as a receptionist at a doctor's office. But nothing seemed to stick. She would start off enthusiastic but quickly become overwhelmed and quit after a few weeks or months. I didn't mind supporting her financially at first. I loved her and wanted to help her. We talked about her going back to school or finding a career she was passionate about, but nothing ever seemed to ignite that spark in her eyes the way art did. I suggested she try selling her art online or at local craft fairs, but she was always hesitant, afraid of rejection. Despite the challenges, our relationship grew stronger. We talked about our future together, and the idea of buying a house came up. Aubrey was excited about the prospect of having a place to call her own, somewhere she could finally feel settled and secure. She talked about turning one of the rooms into an art studio, a space where she could freely create without judgment. I was hesitant at first, given our financial situation. I had some savings, but taking on a mortgage seemed like a big step. However, seeing Aubrey's enthusiasm made me want to make it happen. I thought maybe having a permanent home would give her the stability she needed to overcome her depression and pursue her dreams. We started house hunting, and after a few months, we found a cozy 2-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. It was an older home with character. Hardwood floors, a fireplace in the living room, and a small backyard perfect for gardening. It needed some work, but it had potential. The price was steep, but I figured we could manage if we both worked hard and budgeted carefully. Here's where things get complicated. Aubrey suggested putting the house in her name, saying it would help her build credit and feel more independent. She argued that since she didn't have much in her name, this would be a way for her to establish herself financially. I was uneasy about it, but I wanted to trust her and support her growth. So, I agreed. I helped with the down payment, using a significant portion of my savings, and committed to assisting with the monthly mortgage payments. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. We were fixing up the house together, painting walls and refinishing cabinets. Aubrey seemed happier than I'd ever seen her. She set up her art studio in the spare bedroom and started painting again. She even started a part-time job at a local boutique, saying she felt inspired by the fashionable clothes and wanted to save up for art supplies. I thought we were finally on the right track. Then, about 4 months ago, Aubrey started acting distant. She was spending more time on her phone, going out with friends I'd never met, and coming home late. When I tried to talk to her about it, she'd get defensive and accuse me of not trusting her. She stopped painting as much, and the art studio slowly turned into a storage room. Last month, she dropped a bombshell. She told me she'd met someone else, a guy named Harvey. She said she was in love with him and wanted me to move out of the house. I was devastated. I reminded her of everything we'd been through together, how much I'd supported her and that I'd helped buy the house. She just shrugged and said the house was in her name, so legally I had no claim to it. I was angry and hurt. In a moment of weakness, I reached out to Harvey on social media. I told him everything, how I'd supported Aubrey through her depression, helped her buy the house, and how she was now kicking me out. I'm not proud of it, but I wanted him to know the truth about the woman he was getting involved with. Now, I'm staying with a friend, trying to figure out my next steps. I feel used and betrayed. I've lost my girlfriend, my home, and a significant amount of money. I'm not sure what to do next, or how to move forward from this. I keep replaying everything in my mind, wondering if there were signs I missed. Was I too naive? Too trusting? I thought I was helping someone I loved, but now I feel like I was just being taken advantage of. I'm also worried about Aubrey, despite everything. Her depression has always been a struggle, and I'm concerned about how she'll manage without support. But then I remind myself that she chose this, that she has Harvey now. I guess I'm looking for advice, support, or just a place to vent. Has anyone been in a similar situation? How did you handle it? Any legal advice on what I can do about the house situation? I'm feeling lost and could use some guidance. Update 1. It's been about a month since my original post, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. It really helped me get through some dark days. After my last post, I decided to focus on myself for a while. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to keep my mind occupied. I started going to the gym regularly, finding that physical exertion helped clear my head. I also reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Aubrey. One of these friends, Mike, had gone through a similar situation a few years back. He shared his experience with me over beers one night, and it was comforting to know I wasn't alone in this. Mike encouraged me to see a therapist, something I'd been considering but had been hesitant about. After some thought, I decided to give it a try. The therapy sessions have been challenging but helpful. They've forced me to confront some hard truths about myself and my relationship with Aubrey. I realized that in my desire to help her, I'd often ignored my own needs and boundaries. It's a pattern I'm working on breaking. About 2 weeks ago, I received a surprising call from Harvey. He wanted to meet up and talk. I was hesitant at first, but curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed. We met at a local diner. Harvey turned out to be a decent guy, which made the situation even more awkward. He was a successful businessman, a few years older than me, with a kind face and an air of confidence. He thanked me for reaching out to him and sharing my side of the story. Apparently, when he confronted Aubrey about what I'd told him, she tried to paint me as a controlling ex who was spreading lies. She claimed I'd never supported her financially and that she'd bought the house entirely on her own. She even went as far as to say that I'd been emotionally abusive, using her depression against her. Harvey, being more perceptive than Aubrey gave him credit for, saw through her lies. He did some digging and found out that what I'd said was true. He even spoke to Aubrey's Aunt Margaret, who confirmed my story about supporting Aubrey through her depression and helping her move out. Harvey told me he couldn't be with someone who would use people like that and had ended things with Aubrey. He apologized for his part in the situation, saying he had no idea about my history with Aubrey when they got involved. I felt a mix of emotions hearing this. Part of me was satisfied that the truth had come out, but another part still felt hurt and angry about the whole situation. Harvey and I ended up talking for hours, sharing our experiences with Aubrey. It was a strange bonding experience, to say the least. A few days after my meeting with Harvey, Aubrey called me. Her voice was shaky and she sounded like she'd been crying. She said she was having trouble making the mortgage payments on her own and asked if I could help her out. I was shocked by her audacity. I reminded her that she'd kicked me out and that the house was in her name, as she'd so clearly pointed out when she asked me to leave. She started crying harder, saying she'd made a mistake and that she missed me. She apologized for how she'd treated me and asked if we could try again. I'll admit, for a moment, I was tempted. Despite everything, a part of me still cared for Aubrey. I remembered the good times we'd had, the dreams we'd shared. But then I remembered all the pain and betrayal, and I knew I couldn't go back to that. I told her I was sorry she was struggling, but that I couldn't help her anymore. I suggested she look into selling the house if she couldn't afford it on her own. She got angry then, accusing me of abandoning her when she needed me most. She brought up my promise to always be there for her, throwing my own words back at me. I calmly reminded her that she was the one who had abandoned me first. Then I hung up. Since then, Aubrey has been calling and texting me constantly. Sometimes she's apologetic, other times she's angry and blaming me for her situation. I've been ignoring most of her messages, but it's been draining. I've considered blocking her number, but a part of me is still worried about her well-being. I'm still staying with my friend, but I've started looking for my own place. It's tough to start over at 28, but I'm trying to see it as an opportunity for a fresh start. I'm looking at apartments in a different part of town, somewhere without memories of Aubrey at every corner. I've also been thinking a lot about my relationship with Aubrey and how I ignored so many red flags. Her reluctance to seek help for her depression, her inability to hold down a job, her insistence on putting the house in her name, all of these were warning. Signs I chose to overlook because I loved her and wanted to help her. I've learned some hard lessons through all of this, about trust, about setting boundaries, and about the importance of taking care of myself, even in a relationship. It's been a painful experience, but I'm trying to grow from it. I'm still not sure what's going to happen with the house situation. I've consulted with a lawyer, but since the house is in Aubrey's name and we weren't married, there's not much I can legally do to recoup my investment. It's a tough pill to swallow, but I'm trying to focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on what I've lost. Again, thank you all for your support. It means more than you know. I'll update again if anything significant happens. Update 2. It's been another month, and I have some surprising news to share. About 2 weeks ago, Aubrey showed up at my friend's place where I've been staying. She looked terrible, tired, unkempt, and on the verge of tears. She begged me to talk to her, so we went to a nearby park to chat. Aubrey broke down completely. She admitted that she'd lost her job at the boutique, and without my financial support, she couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings, and she was facing the prospect of losing the house and ruining her credit. She told me that after Harvey left her, she'd fallen into a deep depression. She'd stopped painting altogether and had been struggling to even get out of bed most days. Her Aunt Margaret had refused to take her in, still angry about their past conflicts. Aubrey apologized profusely for how she'd treated me, saying she'd realized what a mistake she'd made. She said she'd taken me for granted, always assuming I'd be there to support her no matter what. She admitted that she'd been selfish and short-sighted, caught up in the excitement of a new relationship with Harvey, without considering the consequences of her actions. She asked if there was any way I'd consider helping her out of this situation. She even suggested we could try to work things out, to give our relationship another chance. I was conflicted. On one hand, I still cared about Aubrey and hated seeing her in such distress. A part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. On the other hand, I couldn't forget how she'd used and discarded me. The pain of her betrayal was still fresh, and I knew I couldn't simply go back to how things were before. After thinking it over, I made her an offer. I would take over the mortgage payments and save the house from foreclosure, but only if she transferred ownership of the house to me. I explained that I'd invested a significant amount of money into the house, and this would be a way for me to protect that investment. Aubrey was shocked by my proposal. She argued that the house was hers, that she'd put so much of herself into it. She talked about the memories we'd made there, the plans we'd had. I reminded her that I'd contributed significantly to the down payment and several months of mortgage payments. I also pointed out that without my help, she'd lose the house anyway. She left without giving me an answer, clearly upset. I didn't hear from her for several days, and I thought that was the end of it. But then, 3 days before the next mortgage payment was due, she called me. She agreed to my terms. We met with a lawyer to draw up the paperwork. It was a tense and emotional process. Aubrey cried as she signed the documents, and I felt a mix of guilt and relief. In the end, Aubrey signed over ownership of the house to me. I immediately made the overdue mortgage payment and stopped the foreclosure process. Once the paperwork was finalized, I told Aubrey she needed to find somewhere else to live. She was upset, accusing me of tricking her, but I stood firm. I gave her 2 weeks to move out, which I think was more than fair, given how she'd treated me. Those 2 weeks were awkward and tense. Aubrey alternated between trying to convince me to let her stay and giving me the cold shoulder. She packed up her belongings slowly, lingering over each item as if trying to prolong her stay. I helped her pack up her art supplies, feeling a pang of sadness as I remembered how passionate she used to be about her art. Finally, yesterday she moved out. She's staying with a friend for now, from what I understand. As she left, she turned to me with tears in her eyes and said she was sorry for everything. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As for me, I'm moving back into the house this weekend. It feels strange. There are so many memories here, both good and bad. But I'm trying to see it as a fresh start. I'm planning to repaint, rearrange the furniture, maybe even renovate a bit to make it feel more like my own space. This whole experience has been a roller coaster, and I'm still processing everything that's happened. I never expected things to turn out this way, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it all. Part of me feels satisfied that I was able to recoup my investment and even come out ahead. Another part feels guilty for essentially taking advantage of Aubrey's desperate situation, even though she had done the same to me. I'm trying to focus on the future now. I've learned a lot from this experience, about relationships, about trust, and about standing up for myself. It's been a tough journey, but I'm hopeful that I'll come out of it stronger and wiser. As I prepare to move back into the house, I'm making plans to turn Aubrey's old art studio into a home office. I've been thinking about freelancing on the side, and having a dedicated workspace might help me get started. It feels like a symbolic way of reclaiming the space and moving forward with my own goals and dreams. I've also been reflecting on my tendency to be a fixer in relationships. With Aubrey, I always felt like I needed to solve her problems and support her, often at the expense of my own needs. My therapist has been helping me understand that, while it's good to be supportive, it's not healthy to lose yourself in the process of trying to save someone else. As for Aubrey, I hope she gets the help she needs. Despite everything, I don't wish her ill. I hope she can find a way to manage her depression and rediscover her passion for art. But I also know that it's not my responsibility to make that happen for her. Some friends have suggested I try dating again, but I'm not ready for that yet. I think I need some time to focus on myself, to figure out who I am outside of a relationship. I'm actually looking forward to living alone for a while, to having the freedom to do things on my own terms. There's still a part of me that wonders, what if? What if Aubrey had never met Harvey? What if I had set better boundaries earlier in our relationship? But I'm trying not to dwell on these thoughts. What's done is done, and all I can do now is learn from the experience and move forward. Thank you all again for your support throughout this ordeal. Your advice and kind words have been a lifeline during some really dark times. I think this will be my final update on this situation. It's time to close this chapter and start writing a new one. Here's to new beginnings and lessons learned.